These kind of tariffs are potentially economy crippling, so it would have set off a wave of panic inside Number 10.
The use of tariffs against allies is completely wrong. It is not the right way to resolve differences within an alliance.
It's almost easiest to understand Trump as a mafia boss. It's this idea he deals in deals. He doesn't, he deals in threats.
If you thought the days of a trade war were over, you sadly are wrong. Donald Trump is yet again threatening us with tariffs. So is the UK's more diplomatic approach going to work? Well, joining me is Peter Walker. Thanks so much for joining us down the line from Parliament. Some lovely wood panelling behind you. So, Peter, you were at Keir Starmer's press conference, emergency press conference this morning. We'll come on to the substance and the tone of what he said in a moment. But first of all, just talk us through the events of the weekend, because Saturday was the big day, wasn't it, when we got this sudden threat that the UK was one of 8 European countries that Donald Trump was threatening with tariffs if effectively they didn't hand over Greenland.
It's all very weird, even by the standards of Donald Trump land, which is a kind of ever-changing feast, a kind of news feast. And it's fascinating and, quite alarming for us. But if you're in Number 10, you must just kind of dread what the next thing is. I mean, the UK, in terms of tariffs, has thus far largely escaped the worst of them. And Number 10 are very, very keen to put this down to the fact that Keir Starmer has this weirdly quite close relationship with Donald Trump. But it has worked, and he's been using this Trump whispering partly to be what he sees as a bridge between Europe and the US over, other issues. But it's very much worked so far in insulating the UK from the worst of tariffs. But this was a sudden shock that the UK, along with these 7 other NATO members, were being singled out for having have troops on Greenland soil, or in the case of the UK, troop, because we have one person there.
Just one.
Just one person. We were joking in the office earlier. They could have sent a second one just for company. But,
or to justify the 10% tariffs that we might now be facing. That is a heavy load to carry.
It's almost easiest to understand Trump as a mafia boss. He doesn't, this idea he deals in deals. He doesn't, he deals in threats. And this was a very, very open threat that unless you pave the way for Greenland to become American, whether by purchase or annexation, then from February the 1st, you get 10% tariffs on all your goods. And if it's still not sorted out by June, it goes up to 25%. And these kind of tariffs are potentially economy crippling. So it would have set off a wave of panic inside Number 10.
So the tone of this press conference this morning, I mean, we know that Starmer was on the phone with Trump over the weekend, trying, as you say, to capitalise on that perceived warm relationship between the two. But clearly that was to no avail, because the UK was grouped together with countries like France, Denmark, Germany, others, as being the target of this new tariff threat. But the tone from Starmer was, there is this very important relationship between the two, not least because of security and defence. We want to keep that going and ruling out, it seemed, any retaliatory tariffs.
It was a quite interesting tone, because it was quiet and conciliatory in some ways, but in other ways it was like very, very firm. There's people, like the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, who very, very much want Number 10 to go in and say, we're going to fight back, we'll have retaliatory tariffs, we'll cancel this deal or that deal.
Right.
Starmer's argument is, whatever Trump does, the US and UK are inexorably linked to each other in terms of nuclear deterrent, intelligence issues. But in terms of the idea of Greenland being given to the US against the wishes of the Danes, he was very firm, and it was interesting on Sunday night, the readout of his call with Trump and with other European leaders said the word, wrong. He said that he stressed to all of them, including Trump, that to try and impose tariffs to force the Europeans to give over Greenland would be wrong.
Yeah.
But it's an incredibly difficult balancing act, and it doesn't look particularly dignified.
Crucially, Starmer seemed to be saying that he didn't actually believe that Trump's plan was to annex or purchase Greenland, that, like you say, he was likely to row back on this. Well, that seems to have been the gamble. So therefore, at this time, retaliatory tariffs weren't necessary. But that is in marked contrast with what we're hearing from the EU and Europe, who are threatening what they call a trade bazooka. I
love that phrase.
Trump in his own language there, which is 93 billion euros in retaliatory tariffs that they'd had prepared already back in 2023, but were on ice, right?
Yeah, this is the French, and Emmanuel Macron has recently taken a kind of more pugnacious tone. And the whole thing is that the EU, as this enormous trading bloc, has actually got the economic power to be able to do that, and the Americans would have to listen. And obviously Trump is heading towards the midterms, assuming the midterms take place, and having a big economic shock to ordinary voters would be, for the Republicans and for him, a very, very bad thing. It's interesting to have the counterfactual of, if Brexit never took place, how much Keir Starmer, if he was PM in the post-Brexit world, or in the world where Brexit never took place, how much Britain would want to play along with this. And you get the sense that Britain would probably be a slightly more cautious voice. But the whole thing is that we are now an independent trading nation, so we can make the decisions we want to. Downing Street argue that this has done us good so far, and we've been able to escape some of the tariffs. But it also means we just, haven't really got the choice. The EU can say, all right, we're going to fight back, and the Americans will, definitely listen. If Britain does that, they'll just laugh.
Yeah. And is that because the EU is substantially so much greater of a force as a trading bloc, and the UK, as you say, in a post-Brexit era, doesn't carry that clout?
It's just maths. It's 27 nations against one.
Yeah.
And you can argue both things have their advantages. But when it comes to the possibility of an American president who simply won't listen to anything except reciprocal threats and force, then being one of 27 is clearly, you have more power.
But how frustrating is this for European leaders? I mean, we know that Starmer was on the phone to Trump on more than one occasion over the weekend, but he was also talking regularly to European leaders. Do you think there's any frustration in Brussels and other European capitals that the UK is trying to take this more moderate line?
To be honest, I wouldn't have particularly thought so. I mean, one of the constants of the post-Brexit world is the UK, worries and thinks endlessly about what Brussels is doing and assumes they're the same way, whereas, to be honest, they've got better things to think about.
Yeah.
And the whole fact is that beyond the trade, there is much more existential stuff at play, which is going to be more on the minds of the European leaders, particularly the NATO leaders, is the fact that, NATO has been the bedrock of security on this continent for decades and decades, and the US guarantee has been central to that. And suddenly that US guarantee doesn't seem to exist anymore. When you have an American president threatening to effectively invade another NATO member, it's the sort of stuff, if you told someone about that even 10 or 15 years ago, they'd think you were utterly mad. This is the sort of stuff which would throw the whole global order on its head. It would embolden Russia, China, every other malevolent actor in the world. So, trade is the focus on this now, but at the back of everyone's minds, or, in the forefront in many of them, is also what this means for NATO as well.
For now, I mean, it's quite a big week, isn't it? Because world leaders are also gathering in Davos. Keir Starmer very keen to iterate in the press conference this morning that, channels with the US remain very open, that they are speaking as leaders, but also that their teams are in regular contact. So clearly the idea is that Trump will sort of soften. The Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has this theory that Trump has misunderstood the sending of troops, or in the UK's case, just one troop to Greenland as more of a threat, and that she and Starmer and others who are perceived to have these close relationships will be kind of working to get in Trump's ear to talk him down.
I'm sure there's something to that. And, the difficult fact that Keir Starmer and other European leaders need to accept is that dealing with the US is to an extent like dealing with a slightly senile medieval king who's got courtiers around him. And on some days you'll get sense from the king, on some days you won't. And a lot of it depends on which of his advisors have got sway at any particular moment. And there are some rational people in the White House. So the hope is that they will just, listen. But it's kind of hard to overstate just how detached from reality Trump actually seems at the moment. And the question that I asked at the press conference was referencing this bizarre note or text message that Donald Trump sent the Norwegian PM, which was basically saying, we're really annoyed with you because your government didn't give me the Nobel Peace Prize. It's not the Norwegian government that actually decides who gets it. So, I basically asked him, when you have a president who says and does things like that, can you understand why British voters wonder if it's even possible to be able to rationalise with him? And he slightly ignored the question, but he did interestingly say that he could understand why British voters, why the British public would actually be a bit peeved at the fact that the US is targeting Britain in this way. So there is the beginning of this acknowledgement in a public sense that, these are not normal times.
Yeah, and in many ways it just feels like a race to the bottom. Peter, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.